All right, welcome back to the Dude Brothers Podcast. This is Episode 4, Surviving Horror. This is the Murder Clue episode, where we're going to talk about two movies that have a little connection. Now, in this day and age, we have what is called escape rooms and, adventures, and it's fun. But if you go back, we have two movies. The first movie is Murder by Death, and the second movie is Clue. Both movies are about murder mystery, and now they're about 10 years apart. 10, 11 years apart, but they both have similarities. And this is part one, where we're just going to generally talk about it, and what we like about it, what we don't. Then you'll have a part two coming up, and we'll talk about, some better things. So I'm going to start it off with, we have Murder by Death, 1976, starring so many people. It's hard to talk about. The main people for right now, we have Peter Falk, or Columbo, for people who might remember that in the 80s. Peter Sellers from the Pink Panther movies, not the Steve Martin versions. And one other one is Sir Alec Guinness, who you might know as Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, to start off with a fun fact that I found out, when they were making this movie, Neil Simon wrote this movie, by the way. They walked up to Alec Guinness at one point, and he was reading a script. And Neil Simon said, so what's that? He said, Alec Guinness said, well, this is a movie they want to make called Star Wars. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew what was going to be coming out. And he said, it's something about the future. And, well, we all know what happened with that. And then he became Sir Alec Guinness, and I wish he was still around. But he played the blind butler, which I must say, he nailed it out the park with the eyes and everything.
Hilarious.
Now, some of the stuff in this movie, since it was in the 1970s, does not compute today. And let me get
this.
I think
it was 1976.
It was 76. Now, we were alive, but we were not. We were just alive. We'll put it that way. Let's get one thing out the way. If you were to go back and watch this, and I suggest everybody does, somebody in, like, the Peter Falk character will say things about queers. And it's a harmless joke. Please don't be offended by it. But one of our favorite jokes from the movie is that Sam Diamond, that's Peter Falk's character, apparently went in he's a detective. And
they're all being blackmailed.
Right. They're all being
blackmailed.
But they bring up a story that he went dressed into drag to a gay bar, but his mistress says, well, for 6 months. And what does he say? His famous line that we love.
Oh,
I would never.
Oh, yeah. No, he, instead of talking about, he was being blackmailed with Polaroid pictures of him. And my favorite line is he goes, he's like, I was working, I was in disguise. And he's like, besides, I would never do anything to a man that I wouldn't do to a woman. But the whole movie, it's like every single line in that movie is quotable, right. Rememberable.
Well, here, let's get into it. Now, in both movies, you have a whodunit. Now, in Murder by Death,
it's basically like a bunch of people locked in a mansion.
But they're all detectives with their partners.
It's basically Clue, the board game.
So, but that's the connection, that Clue is a murder mystery, and in that movie, they're being blackmailed as well. Mm-hmm. And you have crossover characters like Ellen Barkin, who, if anybody knows Private Benjamin, but she was Mrs. Peacock in Clue, and she is Sam Diamond's mistress in that movie in Murder by Death. Mm-hmm. Murder by Death, 5 great detectives with their partners or wives or husbands, whatever. They're trapped in there by Truman Capote, of all people, who wrote the book Breakfast at Tiffany's. They're trapped, and they have to figure out who done it, and the person who's killed is him. Now, I don't believe he comes back, but
yeah.
And part two, we're going to discuss the the ends of the movies and all, but we love the fact that there's so many connections in the movie. Like, they're both set in the times of the 50s by the cars and the outfits and the way and what's going on. Right. But one was filmed in 76 and Clue was in 85. That's amazing to me that they do that. And we were just talking before we started that there's a movie called The Cheap Detective, which has the Sam Diamond-looking character. It might be him. He's in San Francisco in both movies. That's where he's located. And characters, again, from Clue and Murder by Death show up. So, to me, that's the connection, Murder by Clue. So, if you're a fan of murder mysteries, those are some classic movies to check out. They're connected in ways that I don't think they planned it. I really don't think...
Well, I don't think they're supposed to be connected.
No.
But, I mean, you got the same actors, same genre, basically...
Same plot.
Same plot, you know.
They can't leave. Murders keep happening.
Clue is almost like a remake of...
But I've always given Clue credit because it's technically a board game. Yeah. And no other board game has ever been made into a movie, and they did a good job. You
know, Clue, more than Murder by Death, they both have that fast-paced...
Yes.
Another movie that has that fast-paced movie like Clue is Oscar with Sylvester Stallone.
Which has Tim Curry in it.
Tim Curry is in that one. You know, Tim Curry, of course, was the...
But that was more about mobsters when it came down
to it. But it had the same pace.
Where things changed. But... what I loved about like Clue and Murder by Death was, well, Murder by Death is more like, because it's in the 70s, you didn't have access to, CGI, obviously, or anything, even the 80s too. But like, even for the 80s to the 70s, the money for the movies and the way they could do it, but it had to be the actors. You had people who went on, like the Bride of Frankenstein's in that movie. The nanny from Mary Poppins is in it. Sir Alec Guinness, like we said. You have all these great people. The jokes had to hit. Now, let's address another thing. In the movie, Peter Sellers from the Black Panther movie, the Pink Panther movies, plays a Chinese character who's based on...
Charlie Chan, which was a real detective show.
Show or movies or both?
I think it was a TV show. I think they were black and white. Charlie Chan, that might have even started on radio. Like, it's old.
Right.
It is old.
But looking at it now, people would straight up get offended because it's a white guy pretending to be a Chinese guy who has Japanese children.
Talks very stereotypical.
I'm going to do it just so if anyone wanted to be, number one son.
Exactly,
And that's how he addresses his son.
Right, he says number one son, which in Charlie Chan...
He had multiple sons.
Yeah, he had multiple sons, and that's how he never used their names. He would say, number one son, do this, number two son, do that. I don't know why, but, maybe it's a Chinese thing. I have no idea.
And the running joke in Murder by Death, one of them is that Truman Capote's character, and that's who hosts the whole thing, really wants... Peter Sellers' character, Mr. Chan, right? I believe it's Wang. That's right. Well, thank you.
Stereotypical.
That's why Max is here. Wants him to pronounce all of his pronouns and adjectives and everything because he just will say things without its and all that. But
each character in Murder by Death is based on somebody real, like
James Bond.
Yeah, James Bond. Peter Sellers is...
he was based, Neil Simon said, on Humphrey Bogart.
Right. And, you can
like
tell
the Maltese Falcon.
Talks just like him.
But they take it to the extreme, and we were just talking...
They're all exaggerated, of course.
We were looking up... Peter Sellers, Peter Falk nails it.
Well, what's a neat little thing, too, is each character is based on, like, a real detective. Kind of have, like, a James Bond kind of guy. You got the Humphrey Bogart, Private Eye. You got the Charlie Chan spoof, But one thing is, I never knew this until years after, but I was watching deleted scenes. and they're leaving the house. They're leaving the mansion. It's over. They solved the mystery or whatever. The movie's completely over, and they're all driving off. Well, as all the detectives, all 5 of the detectives are driving off, another car is pulling in towards them. And in the car is a guy that looks just like Sherlock Holmes and Watson.
What?
And they look at him and say, "Oh, sorry we're late. What happened?" So they would have had a Sherlock Holmes character in the thing, but that was the joke. Like, he was late, and he was pulling up. But it was obviously Sherlock Holmes. Had the pipe, had the hat, Sherlock Holmes and Watson, and they pull up, and they're like, "Oh, what did we miss? Sorry we're late."
That's amazing.
And at the very end of the movie,
So,
I didn't see that till probably 20, 30 years after I saw the movie.
So that's the basis of Murder by Death. You have 5 detectives, and they have to figure out a murder. Now we jump to 1985. The classic for us is, I see it a lot. People still love it. Clue, based on a board game. It's a whodunit. Again, some of the characters cross over. Ellen Barkin, who plays Mrs. Peacock, was in The Chief Detective and Murder by Death.
Oh, but a famous actor. I mean, you got, Michael Keane?
Michael Keane, who was in Laverne and Shirley.
Spinal Tap.
So he was in Spinal Tap. And many other movies you probably wouldn't know, but go look for him. You'll find him everywhere.
Recently, he was in Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in that.
He's like his brother or something.
Yeah, he's his brother or something.
Yeah. We have Tim Curry he was the first clown. He was the clown in It in the original TV series. But he was also the Darkness in Legend, who, if there is a hell,
Cruise.
we don't want one day we'll talk about our horror movie. But you have Madeline Kahn, who was in Young Frankenstein. She was also in The Chief Detective.
Michael Keane, he's the guy I always say, the guy that was in everything.
Yeah.
He is, if you look his name up, he's in, Jesus, probably 1,000 movies.
Yeah. You also have Christopher Lloyd of Back to the Future fame.
I wanted to bring him up. Yeah.
Colonel Mustard, Richard Mole, who's been in all kind of movies.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of these people have passed on, R.I.P., but they also nailed it, because in Clue, it's a whodunit, and none of them are killed, but the cook and everybody around them starts dying, and they're all blackmailed by a person called Mr. Body, which that's not in the game, but I realize if you look at it, they had to add somebody to do it. But in the end, spoilers. This is a spoiler alert for Clue, 1985. But yeah, the butler does do it. It's Mr. Body who blackmailed everybody. But here's the fun fact that I love to this day.
Don't they show every possible ending?
That's what that was it. They have, if you watch the movie, if you rent it or buy it right now, you get 3 different endings of who may have done it. Now, what I always loved when I found this out, it still gets me. If in 1985, if you went to the movie theater, you didn't know which ending you were going to get. You didn't get all 3. You got one of the 3.
Wow. Okay.
So it wasn't until...
I thought there was more than 3. I thought they did one for each person.
No, there's one for Miss Scarlett, and I forgot her name. I'm very sorry. She ended up in an Aerosmith video, but anyway. One for Mrs. Peacock, and then the end where Michael McKean turns out to be not gay, because he said he was gay for some reason. And then he's an FBI agent undercover. Right. He knew, and that's how that ends. They kill a cop that shows up. They kill a motorist that shows up. Mm-hmm. You need cannon fodder. But yeah, if you saw it in the theater, you didn't know what you were getting.
I just thought of this, but Family Guy recently did a spoof of Clue.
I saw that, yeah. They nailed it. Yeah, because it's very interesting. So yeah, now I don't remember before DVDs if the VHS had all 3 on. I'm sure it did, but I wish I could have seen it in the theater, because people had to be talking like, "Which one did you see? And which one did you see?" And what a good way to bring people back. Yeah. Like, what am I going to get? Now, I guess I'd be pissed if it was the same one.
Well, it'd be neat, though, because, I never knew about... I mean, I knew they had different endings. but I never knew that the theater showed different ones.
I didn't know
so
way later on.
If you didn't, okay, in the trailer they don't say you got different endings to the movie. So let's say, for instance, back then, we were kind of young to be going to the theater. I mean, 10ish. Well, 10 exactly, actually.
Yeah.
But say, for instance, you went on Monday, saw the movie. I go on Wednesday. And we're like, oh, you seen a movie Clue? Oh, yeah, it was neat, blah, blah, blah. And then we talk about the ending and we realize it's something different. Yeah. That would have been cool.
That's a clever idea.
I would love for a movie nowadays to do that.
I don't go to the movies that much anymore, but we check out trailers all the time. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel. Right now it's Colonel ChuBs. Thank you, Garden of Fear. But I haven't seen a good Whodunit.
No.
There is a movie coming out, and I forgot the name. Forgive me, but Ryan Reynolds is in it. But it's literally a Whodunit, and it looks like Clue. But I've only seen one trailer. I got to find it. But
that'd be cool.
Like I said, you have escape rooms now. There's one in our city. We're down in New Orleans, but that's a good idea. You didn't have that even probably 10 years ago.
Right.
But the thing with Clue, it like you said, it moves fast. You don't have. They literally run in the movie.
Oh yeah.
But then they separate, then they find secret passages. Mm-hmm. Now, Murder by Death, same thing.
Yeah.
But they had to talk more. But they still had swords coming down and statues falling over.
Right.
But in both ones you couldn't leave. They made the point, like Murder by Death, cages came on the windows. Yeah. Clue, he tried to go out one thing, there was dogs by the thing in the door. They had one key.
You were trapped. You couldn't get out.
Right. Now Clue, they had to go by the game where you have a wrench, a rope, and a gun, and a candlestick, right, etc. But now Murder by Death, it was Truman Capote, no spoilers for that, 1976 movie. He brings everybody there, and he's the ones who's murdered, but it's Whodunit.
Yeah.
Hence the name. And that's the key, but you see these actors crossing over, and when we get to part 2, we'll talk about how the Chief Detective fits in, but...
Yeah, I'm going to go back and watch that, because I'm curious to see if it's a full-fledged comedy. It looks... It is?
It looks, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's serious at all.
Because some of it looked kind of serious. But...
Well, the clip I seen for the Chief Detective, he's talking to Madeline Kahn, who's in Clue. Mm-hmm. She gives him 17 different names, and he's like, I don't care what your name is, just make up something. It's really funny.
Well, no, I can't wait to see it.
But Ellen Barkin is his girlfriend in that one, Mrs. Peacock. Okay. Stockard Channing, who's from Grease. Rizzo and Grease is also in that, very young. It's awesome. That movie's 78, by the way, The Chief Detective. So it followed up. So maybe that's where Sam goes to. He's a detective in San Francisco, so I assume it's the same. Mm-hmm. But, so... That's another thing, movies right now, there's loose connections. Look forward to our connections, it goes on forever, where characters go from movie to movie, like Anthony Michael Hall and Robert Downey Jr. If you want to see, wait till that comes out. But here it's direct, where it's the same actresses and actors. Now, the names may change, but it's them. I mean, I'm sorry, it's them. But they don't connect. They don't even say I don't think in The Chief Detective he says, yeah, I was at this house where this happened. And it's definitely not this. Mrs. Peacock is not the same person.
Right.
But she's back in a murder whodunit mystery in a house. And you have it's the same time frame, the cars, you can tell it from the 50s. Now, Clue takes away a lot of stereotypes. It makes the backstories more interesting. But if you love comedies, check them out. You can see the connections. We always love these movies. Now, maybe we're old school and the jokes are a little outdated, but sometimes the jokes nowadays aren't funny. But we love them. And the connections, sometimes you just can't deny them. So,
anybody that's listening, if you want to hear about an awesome connection, we're just going to tip you off to it here. We're not going to
tease it.
Yeah, we're going to tease it. We're not going to tell you the connection here. But if you're interested, we are going to talk about a movie which has Jim Carrey, Clint Eastwood, Liam Nielsen. I always say his name wrong. Yeah, so Jim Carrey, Clint Eastwood, Liam Neeson, or in a movie, maybe you heard of it, it's called The Deadpool. So you might be thinking, how do you not know about this? How can those famous actors be in The Deadpool and you don't know about it? Well, we're going to tell you about it in an upcoming episode, so that's definitely worth checking out.
And to add to that little tease, there's also a movie with Jim Carrey back in the day as a vampire. But
yeah,
and this is before any of his Ace Ventura-ish stuff. But
is that his first movie? Probably. Yeah.
I know the Deadpool's probably older than that movie, honestly, because that's like the late 70s, if 80. And then
it's in the 80s.
Early 80s. And
well, no, Guns N' Roses music's in it, so it's got to be
that's
Appetite to Destruction.
86, 87. We don't know everything at one time, people, but no, that's why you need to be coming back.
Yeah, that's a little tease. That should get your attention.
Yeah. So we just love to bring these things to you, people. Thank you for tuning in if you're here. This is episode 4 of Surviving Horror with the Dude Brothers. Murder by Clue, part 1. Part 2 will be coming out. Oh, you'll have to wait. And then check out all the next things coming up. All the teases. We love to tease y'all. So, from Max and Chubbs, we are the Dude Brothers. Good night.
Later.